Hey everybody! It's me, not Markiplier, unfortunately. But yeah, no, since I have 100% the game, I said I would do a lore reading of every single one of these. And so this starts now. Victory. The Path of Achra, Island of Towers, is said to be at the spiritual center. Those who ruled the towers claimed dominion over Achra. When the obelisk rose, last from the dune sea, history became another distortion of light. The astral wall was pierced. Beyond the star path, against the surpassing dark, a final dominion was claimed. So began the Night of Achra, of the roiling, world-ending sea. Here, pilgrims seek their glory, as a terrible wind howls at the edges of all things. Path of Fire. It is said, fire was once the domain of Phoenix, a star goddess of Achra, before it was stolen by Azar, who carried it to the lands below to revive Agni, his divine twin. In the burning lands, the last followers of Azar were slaughtered by Exorites or Exorites of the War Queen upon her violent ascension, while priests of Agni fled into the wilderness. Beyond, to the many cults of Achra, fire magic is a symbol of both destruction and vitality. The path of fire is taught by flame priests, who worship in the mountain temple lands among pillars of orange stone. Martial purity. In the unending battles of Achra, the violence of the path, there are many forms of martial excellence. Champions and duelists roam the coastal plains, teaching the disciplined fighter lore of lost Shuparak. In the deep forest, the mountains, and wild places, bare-chested wanderers attain brutal might, while assassins perfect their subtle art. The way of martial purity was taught by a nameless Strigilla of the eastern desert. In her words, nothing is greater in life, all are welcome to the contest of force. Path of Lightning. In the southern reaches of the mountain temple lands, the storm temples stand apart, blessed by Hadad himself. It is said, in the first lowering of the waters, it was a sorcerer of the storm temples who called the first thunder drakes down to Achra. Beasts of sparkling power, their blood was coveted by those who became known as the Thunder Priests, who abandoned their temples for the hubris of the towers. The path of lightning is taught by those who remain, who contemplated the storm, how the world may end, a final perfection of wind and light. Astral purity. When the divine gaze first rained light through the void, the stars lay upon Achra as glittering forests. In the blooming of the dark, the gaze recoiled from its own radiance. All was drawn upward, the stars like beads on a string. Thus, the star path was formed, as written in the tract of Ikshana. Accordingly, those who seek astral purity yearn continually upward, from from the wilds of Achra to the temple lands, to the towers of the path, and the astral wall that guards against beasts of the star wind and beyond. Aspirant Archimagi, questing knights of crystalline warren, psychonauts, the wandering king himself, all have pursued their art towards the legendary star path, often to their doom, where pentats, brutal, violet-armored knights, and great demons of nameless stature roam the passages of light. Path of Ice. There are vast lands of Achra where the ice rules all. The frozen waste, the ice caves of Albaz, the crevice lands. Greatest are the high glaciers, world-spanning final edge of the divine gaze, border of chaos, birthplace of the Siku where none have passed. Those who seek the path of ice, Agniacs, Angiats, priests, often suffer its intoxication, and in the frenzy make war upon the middle lands of Achra, as annihilators of decay, heat, formlessness itself. According to Inuga sages, this frenzy is what drove the Sutmir army to its final gruesome invasion of the infernal plane. Path of Death. In the Gate of Death, fortress of the Princes, goddess corpse, where Eresh squats in dim grief, death magic reigns supreme. Those who truly walk the path of death are therefore said to have gazed between the teeth of Eresh. In the many expanses of Achra, there are many who carry death's mantle, the ancient imprisoned cave god of death, sullen beneath the world, apostate skin priests, and crowds of Gehen with pilgrim death knights who seek freedom from the cosmic struggle, wandering basilisks and withered imps spreading blight paths, wild death drakes enraged beneath their decaying curse, skull wearers of the Lakra priesthood who seek power through violent rites. To the sages of the temple lands, death is the final element, a vitalizing blot in the admixture of the earth. Psychic purity. The way of psychic purity is embodied by master servants of the Yellow Church. The church contains powerful relics of the ancient earth, and is defended by a militant priesthood against mind hunters and pale heliots of the salt waste. Many of these priests, seduced by the boundlessness of their ability, are themselves driven into exile. By dreaming beyond the stars, it is said they sojourn through the gate of Horn, to the terrible mind-worn of the astral dark, where they form a pact with the gold demon by drinking its ichor. These intoxicated priests, still adorned in the bright robes of the Yellow Church, seek to cross the astral wall and discover the room at the end of the mind, where a great truth awaits them, shut past all thought. Path of Life. The path of life, all magic of growth, springs from the first grove, divine forest of the ancient earth. Pride of the Green Mother, her children dwelled there in splendor until it was destroyed by a warrior king who, seeking glory, felled the giant life-giving pines with his legendary cleaver. This, it is said, is how the divine siblings of Ninhurs and Humbaba, filled with poison and rage, became king-haters, enemies of the obelisk, until the last rising of the waters. Fair rods and other monsters, vengeance-blind fragments of the grove's magic now wander the deep forest of the west, while hidden, the nation of Briarfolk prays for its final apocalyptic return. Path of Blood. Through the Path of Blood is widely preached by gore cults who roam the mountains and deserts of Achra. Blood magic is traced to stranger realms. Deep in the tunnel lands above the infernal plane, the red-furred Urga congregate in festivals of blood, where they sacrifice groaning beasts to the inner blood that surges beyond the dark. In the temple lands, blood mages often speak of this place, a gyre of blood rotating through the stars, itself a great red star, curled like a snake that presides within the blood pool of life, a font to which all history vanishes. Path of Poison. Through cults of poison thrive in the deep forest and dawn marshes. Nowhere does its magic hold greater sway than the northern filth valleys. All poison comes from the Green Mother, it is said, the source of all life, through the brood of the filth valleys once worshipped during the reign of the oozes. In the aging of Achra, the Green Mother became divided from life, and lay down in the mountains. A dark violet citadel rose from her corpse, now called the Gate of Death, throne of the Blight Princes. Through the blood have turned to doom magic, the Green Mother is still invoked by Vinites, great fighters who spread the path of poison throughout Achra, the shimmering middle between life and death. Powerless. Many who walk the path of Achra crave the great glory won powers of magic and skill. Rare pilgrims will abstain from the great powers, keeping a vow of humility. To one such as these, glory alone is the prize, a divine mystery that glimmers above the earth. Champion. Champions are those who seek the pinnacle of martial ability. It was a nameless champion of the coastal plains who finally slew the bull giant of Achra. Taking up the giant's famous axe, she wandered into the east, far beyond the world-ending sea. Flame Knight. In the ancient war that lit the burning lands, it is said a Flame Knight wielded a great sword forged from a dragon's breath. A follower of Azar, he was executed during the reign of the War Queen. His blazing sword, coveted by a pale, shapeless demon, was lost to the stars. Shanti. The first Shanti was a cold orphan raised in the storm temples of Achra. A master of the lightning dance, she became a legendary duelist that wandered the coastal plains, gathering followers. Her death came at the hands of an unnatural, voiceless knight, clad in violet armor, fallen from a path in the stars. Frost Knight. The Anuga Frost Knights of the high glaciers once stood against the Sutmir armies, repelling them to the crevice lands below with their chilling shield magic. The tradition was preserved as a glorification of ice, the end of depredation. Sam Knight. The first Sam Knights were bare-chested fighters of the deep forest, eaters of a magic vine. The strongest among them journeyed to the great bouts of Lost Shuparak, where they secured renown, as few could stand against their irrepressible vim. Sahasi. The Sahasi are sacred warriors of the mountain temple lands, guardians of the artless initiates and lore seekers who crave the succor of mystery. When the temple stones were young, there was a prophetic Magus who spoke of the great war annihilating the stars. The Sahasi order was formed around this secret fear. As they grow in strength, Sahasi often make pilgrimage to the astral wall, where they pledge to defend Achra against the unknown horrors of the glimmering dark. Death Knight. The Death Knights were once skeleton thralls of a blight prince, waging war for the Gate of Death. In a far-raging raid through Achra, the Death Knights came upon the Desert of the Gods, where it is said Hashem smiled and restored their will. The Death Knights rebelled, overwhelming their prince with heavy, relentless blows until his corpse was finally abandoned to the whirling sands. Dionmai. The Dionmai rose to prominence in the bouts of the Lost Shuparak, where they learned to sicken their foes with a secret bare-fisted technique. They now wander Achra as duelists and assassins, though many still worship you, the poisoned stone, of that doomed city. These Dionmai make pilgrimage to the tunnel lands beneath the Dawn Marshes, in search of the legendary jade polis of you, that holds countless blessings and relic prisms of subtle green light. Executioner. Executioners receive their training underground, among the red-masked folk of a secret tunnel church. The War Queen of the Burning Lands, coveting the eminence of her marble palace, often used executioners to hunt priests of Azar, who fled into the mountains. Executioners have since been feared as blood-smeared oppressors, though they bear no loyalty to any ruler, obeying only their occult creed, the rite of slaughter, that redeems all distortions of the earth. Mind Knight. The Mind Knights are noble warriors of the Yellow Church, trained by the Master's servants to channel their willpower into martial skill. When the Heliots surrounded the church and threatened its ruin, a Mind Knight challenged the Arch-Heliots to a ritualistic duel. The white sun glinted on her arcing blade, and it is said, and the Heliots fled in terror as their leader fell immaculately, sliced in half upon the salt waste. Pyromaniac. The first Pyromaniac was a flame priest of the Mountain Temple lands who discovered the secret syllable of the fire, and was bestowed of an endless heightening. Pyromaniacs are those who seek this hidden sound, inflaming themselves through ritual acts of incineration. It was a Pyromaniac who brazenly summoned the first untamed red dragon from within the sacred mountain. He was devoured, it is said, and the beast, brimming with swallowed magic, rampaged into the world-ending sea. Tomasa. When the wandering priest of Agni took refuge in the storm temples, he abandoned the destroyer god and began worshipping Rabau, a young storm god of cataclysm. Rabau grants power to all who perform his ritual of immolation. Those who pursued this dangerous art became known as Tamasas. The priest and his Tamasa followers were soon exiled from the storm temples for their recklessness as taboo violators for the profane act of self-incineration. Exultites. Exultites descend from exorites, judge executioners of the burning lands, who upon the war queen's death wandered purposeless into the mountains of Achra. It is said they discovered a secret tunnel church. The exorites took shelter and received sacraments of blood magic from the red-masked folk of that place. They emerged as reinvigorated exultites, a mysterious battle cult who gathered the sacrificial followers to one day wage judgment against the world-ending sea. Topeth. In the burning lands, when the War Queen's reign was broken, a secret coven of sorcerers fled the Marble Palace. Traveling south to the borders of the deep forest, among the Lakra they became known as Topeths, famous for their ritual incineration of their followers, the power to transmute life force into waves of death. In time, the Tophetic arts were embraced by the skull wearers of the Lakra priesthood. However, some priests refused to accept the Topheths, as their history in the Burning Lands and true role within the Marble Palace has been mysteriously lost. Arsonists. The Arsonists began as an apostate sect of the Growth Priests, who preached the ritual burning of life to make room for fresh growth. When the forests of the West were threatened by rampaging fire drake, a coven of arsonists lured the beast into the mountains, where they snuffed out its fire with charged, surging roots summoned from their fervent prayers. Arsonists are now honored allies of the Grove Cult, restoring the forest of Achra with invigorating heat. Surtmir. To be Surtmir once meant to pursue the sublime mixture of fire and ice, as taught by Ragna, the dead god of the frozen waste. After a power struggle, many of the Surtmir clans, intoxicated by ice magic, became monstrous warrior giants, forming a terrible army. Those who keep the old ways still invoke the ancient heart of Ragna, a ruddy ember that trembles beneath the shining ice. Hazar. When an exiled Heliot of the Salt Waste came to the temples of the Naqui, she was welcomed into their culture of attunement and became a renowned sage. In time, she synthesized the fire magic of the temple lands with her own rites of corrosion, and so arose the first Hazars, masters of the acid ground who patrol the western mountains, defending against monsters of the deep forest. Kashra. The Kashra are valiant star warriors that sojourn beyond the astral wall to battle the champions of the Pentat, purple-masked demons of the astral dark. Though Pentat are numerous and powerful, they refuse to invade Achra so long as a Kashra lives, preferring the dual festival, the honored contest of power, glorying in the shimmering arches of night. Alright. Frenzied One. The Frenzied Ones trace their cult to the Prince of Consort of the Burning Lands, once beloved of the War Queen. In the depths of the Marble Palace, the prince discovered a red mask, a relic of Phoenix, that inflamed his spirit past all constraint. So masked, the prince hefted his golden axe and abandoned the War Queen to wage war upon the towers of Achra, screaming, it is said, of a great path in the stars. Gothi. Gothi are devoted warriors priests of the storm temples, called the Exquisite Ones, who embody the fine light of the thunderbolt, sacred to Hadad. It is said the storm temples are the greatest height in Achra. When the world-ending seed rises, the Gothi pledge to return to the blue pillars, to display their glittering art, to become the final beauty of the earth, shining against the plunge of annihilation. Stormbringer. When a wide-raging Arjana came to the storm temples of Achra on a trade journey south, he was initiated into the blue-pillared hall and learned the ways of Hadad, the storm god at the beginning of the world. He became the first Stormbringer, famous among his folk, countless Granga crawling up from the crevice lands, seeking to pillage Arjana wealth, were annihilated by his magic gale. Alize. The Alize rose from a sect within the storm temples, Tengu priest of Azom, the star wind, child of Agara. Though Azom's name was lost, the Azil Alize tradition persevered, and in time was brought to the Quamar of the Astral Wall, who welcomed the cursed bird forms of the Tengu. The Aleze now serve as rangers of the void, dancing swiftly along paths of blue-violet light. Bolga. When an Albaz traveler made pilgrimage to the storm temples, passing first through the gate of death, she was outcast for bearing the touch of blight. In the ravine lands far below the temples, she founded the dreaded cult of Bolga, the unending black-clouded storm that revels in death. Shazuza. The Shazuza are disciples of a forgotten calamity, the sickening thunder that once swept the eastern desert. The first Shazuza was a sublime achra, who, defying the limits of flesh, learned to beckon lightning to smite the poisoned blood of her enemies. She became a terrible destroyer of ratmen, who, in those days, still swarmed up through the festering many-tunneled dark. Samsi. When a storm monk made pilgrimage to the Yellow Church to learn from the master servants there, she founded Samsi, the Way of Brilliance. For many years her yellow lightning would persist as an overwhelming weapon against mind hunters and heliots of the salt waste. Damunja. The Damunja are assassins who traced their art to a wandering night serpent that escaped a red-hued vortex in the stars. When the serpent came to Achra, it taught the secrets of blood to the Damunja, along with the horror of the Thunder Curse, which became their mark. In time, the serpent lost its power of speech and flight, and withdrew into the Tunnel Lands, where it was sacrificed in an Urga festival of blood. It is said a red mist still presides in the deep chasms of the earth. Orm-Jarl. As the Lakra priesthood rose to power in the deep forest, they sent a contingent to the storm temples to learn the secrets of thunder magic. They returned with a thunder drake whelp, which in the dim closeness of the forest grew white horns instead of wings and became the first blue worm. Orm-Jarls are masters of blue worms, though in time many of the beasts would be stolen and raised as mounts for the rapacious storm knights who covet the authority of the towers. Agniak, or Angiaks, are blessed priests of the Anuga, sworn enemies of the monstrous Tupalak. The Anuga Creed, the title of Angoik, is available to all wanderers, provided they submit to the ordeal of spirit, the sacred emptying of heat. The outskirts of Anuga villages often contain the frozen bodies of failed Angyuks, crouched like shrines lost to the swirling earth. Ice Shah. The Ice Shahs are an Arba-founded cult of the northern waste who perfect their magic of animate ice at the foot of the high glaciers. All around their hidden temple, it is said, spreads an enchanted tundra of cold green-blue vines that guards them against the bronze-masked Granga, exiles of the Blue Tower, who pillage from their dwelling palaces deep in the crevasse lands. Myrrha, the crystalline warren, secret burrow temple of sorcerers and knights who covet their inward-facing meditative arts, sometimes dispatches pilgrims to the surface lands of Achra. These are known as the Myrrha, mirror summoners who by arcane edict seek to reflect the world back upon itself, to redeem the Warren's unknown mission beneath the earth. Dreamer. Most dreamers serve the goddess Metar, who slumbers deep within the high glaciers, guarding the world's edge with phantasms of ice. Some, however, abstain from Metar's gift and choosing instead to wander Achra. It is said a dreamer once came to the Yellow Church to challenge the psychic art of the Master's servants. A battle ensued, a great spiritual blue light, it is said, and in the fading dusk, a gentle rain fell on the salt waste. Uspori. It is said that the northern filth valleys were disgorged by the Green Mother after the first lowering of the waters, in disgust at the sudden brilliance of the stars. In that place of wild sickness, the Uspori are those who craft a unique paralyzing poison through a secret ritual performed in hidden caves, accompanied by monstrous Bokavak. The Uspori are feared skirmishers and often stand against blight raiders from the gate of death. Ankarak. Ankaraks are feral spirits from the land beyond the skin. Among the Anuga, the aspect of Ankarak is often invoked when their territories are threatened by ice priests or Surtmere fanatics. After a ritual burning of beast fat, an anointed fighter takes on the Ankarak's long-clawed shape and begins the sacred gathering of blood. Unuka. It was an Anuka at the Arjana who first stood against the Surtmere onslaught, as they poured blue-furred and monstrous from their volcano. The Anuka entered a trance. In a pillar of cold blue light, death rained down on the invaders, though a Surtmere war-king finally triumphed. Beheading the Anuka, a great mound of his comrades lay withered and slain upon the frozen waste. Archmagus. When hobgoblins, coveting the secrets of gold, made war upon the mountain temple lands, it was a lone Archmagus who defended the pillared gate. It is said the Archmagus sank into a deep trance. Within moments, the hobgoblins were destroyed in a hiss of astral flame, reduced to shapeless lights that swayed like a field of transparent violet flowers. Arboreus. Those who pursue meditation past the body's own life limits, it is said, receive a new form that draws from the root of life, the first grove whose worldly presence was destroyed long ago. Practitioners take on the shape of an ancient divine star tree, called the Tree of Arboreus, glittering with flocks of cosmic wisps hatched from the pink stars of the night. Ill Prophet. When the Green Mother perished, Brood legend speaks of an ill star that appeared in the sky. Ill prophets are disciples of this star, and are said to themselves emit a strange light that warps the land itself into a glimmering poisonous waste. Above the filth valleys, there is a purple-hued mountain, whose slopes were long ago lost to the work of the prophets, who prepare for the day when their star falls to Achra, and the spirit of the Green Mother is revived. Destroyer. Destroyers begin their service as powerful mages of the Gate of Death, standing sentry upon the dark violet ramparts. When a destroyer gains too much magic, enough to challenge the Blight Princes, he is dressed in feathers and rags, fitted with a strange mask, and cast into the mountains above the crevice lands to wage war against the Granga, who wield bronze chakrams and fear no violence. Psychonaut. When a Kumar sojourner came to the Yellow Church, she founded the cult of the Psychonauts, a hidden path by which priests could enter the stars. This path is studied in secret, for adept psychonauts rarely return to Achra, preferring to flit through the passages of cosmic light, fearing the encumbrance of the earth. Horror. Among the Cosmar, who writhe in their nameless chasm. To become a horror is a triumph against suffering, a whirling, shapeless power. Those who take on the aspect of horror are scorned by the deities of Achra, who, it is said, fear and reject all gifts from beyond the stars. Venite. The Venites are fighters trained in the ways of poison, the shimmering middle that overcomes both life and death. Though they often defend the northern filled valleys against blight priests and wandering monsters from the frozen waste, many Venites travel the lands of Achra, teaching their discipline. Dancing on the edge of decay, remembering the Green Mother, who died long ago, they sing, "O cusp, O shimmering emerald cusp." Whew. Snake Dancer. Authority over serpents is renowned in the Dawn Marshes, where monstrous achra serpents are bent to the will of Keliaths. Legend tells of a reptilian wanderer who once passed through the marshes, strangely colored from the ancient Saurian clan whose step mesmerized the serpents underfoot. It is said the serpents followed the wanderer out of the marshes in a great slithering mass, and the snake dancer tradition remains, coveted by the brutal Keliaths that rule the Whispering Reeds. Mirzat. Those who poison their own blood to seek abomination are called Mirzat. When the Serpmirs sought to invade the Filth Valleys, it was the Mirzat who drove them back with waves of foul-smelling gore. Vengati. The Vengati are a sect of mesmers from the Yellow Church who took up a residence in the lost Shuparak, where they were inspired by you, a goddess contained in a jade sculpture, known as the Poisoned Stone. Through the proliferation of sickness, the Vengati amplified their psychic art, though it is often said these practices sped the downfall of that great city. Plaguemancer. It is said that Achra was once a world of cities strung with the wide stone paths until the coming of Plague, the destroyer of delight. Plaguemancers in somber covens keep dim remembrance of this devastation. Among the brood of the Filth Valleys, Plaguemancers are well known as prophets and terrible nation-destroying mystics, reaching far beyond the natural indignities of death. Doomsayer. Doomsayers are dreaded monks of the wilderness, empowered by an imprisoned cave god of death, scorned by the folk of Achra. Doomsayers are said to perform their gathering rites in a secret canyon deep below the temple lands among the skulls of gigantic beasts from the ancient earth that protrude mask-like from the stone. Wormborn. The Wormborn follow in the ways of an exiled grove priest. Upon facing starvation in the deep forest of the west, the priest performed a desperate life-beckoning ritual. His body was fused with a multitude of emerald-hued worms, the swarming corpse-eaters of that wild place. Acolyte. The Acolytes were once a sect of the Alhaja, who seek the highest piety. Now, all acolytes gather in a sacred yurt city in the desert of the gods where they fast and burn incense, kneeling beneath the plumes of dark violet smoke. It is said their minds are filled with death and sacrifice, pleasing to divinity, which soars above every indulgence. Pain Cleric. Pain clerics are clergymen of the secret tunnel church, teaching scriptures of blood beneath achra. Their followers are themselves devoted to pain, which the clerics channel into a terrible curse, often inflicted on doomed wanderers who breach the church's border passages. Briar Mage. Briar Mages are friends of the Briar folk who dwell in the secret corners of the deep forest. They stand opposed to the Bramble Priests who hunt the Briar folk, coveting their ever living vines. One day, according to the Briar folk, the first grove will return, the forest will retake the world, vines will cover the mountains, and the terrible ocean will soften into clear, nourishing pools. Gliva. The first Gliva was a wandering druid who, during the pilgrimage into the Tunnel Lands, discovered the hidden song of the mushrooms, a powerful psychic communion. Seeking to spread their faith, Glivas now wander the deep forest of the West, where they are persecuted by the Lakra priesthood, who above all worship the redemptive possibilities of violence. The Glivas claim that one day the mushrooms will overtake the surface of Achra, and the first grove of the child gods will be reborn in an image of fungal splendor. Blood Drinker. The Blood Drinkers began as a sect of Morlocks, devoting their bodies to sacred life thirst. Legends still remain of their emergence, where in one hallowing night they glutted themselves on the vitera of cave folk in the hills below the Naqui temples. Though the sect was annihilated by a Naqui flame knight, their cursed invigorating desire entered the magic of Achra, waiting for those who choose to grasp it, deep in the pool of blood. Mesmer. In the hierarchy of the Yellow Church, those master servants who choose to venture into Achra are called Mesmers. A Mesmer, seeking the wide lore of the earth, was traveling through lost Shuparak when Ratman emerged from the plain and assaulted the ruined walls. There was a strange bell sound, and it is said the entire force of Ratmen lay down, their minds emptied, yellow-green eyes bulging in the dust. Mind Hunter. The first Mind Hunter was an initiate of the Yellow Church, who questioned the wisdom of the Master Servants, fearing intoxication of psychic power. Exiled to the Salt Waste, he was abducted by Hiliots and subjected to their terrible rites of dissolution. Against this suffering and the furious revolt of his spirit, it is said, the exile gained the secrets of blood magic, and thereby became a deadly assassin, the first Mind Hunter, eternal enemy, and brutal mirror of the disciplined Mind Knights of the Yellow Church. Blood Mage. The Blood Mages learned their magic from Urga festivals deep in the Tunnel Lands and the chasms above the infernal plane. They call upon the inner blood, a source of power, hidden in the surpassing dark. All skin, all flesh, they say, is an overfull jar, a thing to be opened. Paragon. The Paragons were founded by the first ancient king of Lost Shuparak. It is said the Paragon anointed army of those days were unconquerable turquoise armored, bristling with immaculate lances. They famously slayed a cave worm of the deep earth in a battle that flattened the coastal plains. Gallus. The Gallic Order was born from the death of the Bull Giant. Desiring the power of earth-shaking, the first Gallus wore armor crafted from the giant's dense bones. Strigella. There is once a nameless strand of the eastern desert, whose companion animal was slain by a torch priest. The strand descended on the tents of the torch coven, her furious javelins flying in every direction, and Amir found her kneeling, grief-stricken among the impaled priests. The name he granted her, Strigella, has since become a title of great renown. Beith Nocti. The Behith-Nakti are sacred bare-chested fighters that once roamed the desert of the gods. In the purity of the desert, it is said they found a secret place of absolute piety. In the hissing sand, a smooth terrace of white, otherworldly stone. Aquila. The Aquila, or Aquila. The Aquila are a rebel sect of the Yellow Church. Devoted to mind fighting, they wandered the salt waste in the desolate western mountains as sages and bringers of justice, often battling the fanatic Brungle clans that seek to raid Achra from their worm pits. Suwag. The Suwag are wandering fighters who enchant their weapons with animate gore. It is said the first Suwag was an Albaz warrior who explored deep into the tunnel lands, where she discovered a secret church of blood. Hoping to purify the weaknesses of her blade, she embraced the church's painful, transforming mysteries. Berserker. The Berserkers are brutal fighters who roam the cold foothills of the deep forest. In combat, they mar themselves with ice, blood, and deathly curses, known as the Three Kings of Violence. Berserkers are held sacred by the Lakra priesthood, where they are anointed as living offerings to the triumphant mysteries of pain. Windblade. Windblades once roamed the eastern desert as fighter mystics, lending their skills to warring emirs. In their tradition, it is said, no law, no heart's distemper surpasses the nobility of thy flashing blade. Star Jumper. The folk of Achra who pass into the stars are said to feel a joyous emancipation. To the Quamar of the astral wall, this freedom is cautioned as a spiritual ailment, a fall to edgelessness. The most ailed, the most joyful, are called Star Jumpers, of those who wander the violet paths, who leaf the widening dark. Arata. The Aratas of Achra are master prayers singers, consigning their bodies to divine judgment. It was a sect of ecstatic Aratas who first made pilgrimage to the shores of the path, rowing magnificent ribbon-hung ships from the ruined cove of Lost Shuparak. It is said their pious song was the first offering to the shadows of the towers. Oozemancer. When the Green Mother lived, the filth valleys were a land of oozes, shimmering emerald creatures of the elemental poison. In time, those who made pacts with the oozes became oozemancers and took up the rulership of the filth valleys. With the rise of the Gate of Death, the power of the oozes faded, though rare oozemancers still wander the dim, poison mists. Necromancer. Necromancers are those committed to the lore of reanimation, of death from life. Desiring power, or striving for their own ends, they often stand opposed to edicts passed by the Gate of Death, and for generations have been hunted by its blight princes. Liturgists. In the mountain of temple lands of Achra, the liturgists are those who lead and combine the element cults. They are followed by great crowds of zealots who yearn to one day gather in the sacred pillars streaked with violet astral light. Elementalist. It was an elementalist who conjured the first temple of Achra, fabricating it and dedicating it to the Spectra, fabricating it from the young mountains and dedicating it to Spectra, the vanished goddess of rainbows. Birth and the once living sea, the temple is now considered nameless and lost, buried by the new deities of the temple lands, or, according to certain sages of the wilderness, hidden under the towers of the path. In the distortion of ages, it has become increasingly rare for a true elementalist to rise from the kinetic arts, though aspirant cultists often claim this title. Torturer. Torturers, it is said, first learned their art of the sacred agony from an exiled Slav priest who fled the deep forest for the safety of the winding mountains. Though torturers are often shunned in the Temple Lands, they remain unmatched in subduing the giant Obars that rampage from the tunnels who obey nothing but pain. Beastmaster. Beastmasters are trainers of rare beast familiars who once served as archpriests within the walls of Marduk's stone city. In the lost Shuparok, the Beastmasters gathered for a tournament of might, but were attacked by fire-pledged assassins from the Burning Lands, who coveted their brass dragons. The Beastmasters have since abandoned civilization, wandering the mountains and wild places as duelists. Shapeshifter. Long ago, a priest of Lost Shuparak made pilgrimage to the Dawn Marshes and learned of a marsh cleric who could take on a serpent shape. Coveting this power, the priest stole the scroll of changing, but was instead cursed by the cleric, warped into a monstrous chimeric form. He became the first shapeshifter whose green-hued blood craves transformation. Arch-lizard. The Arch-lizards are a sect of pure shapeshifters who trace their origin to the lost temples of the Dawn Marshes. Beneath the mountains, where an underground river fans out into the coastal plains, the marshes were once ruled by serpent kings in noble splendor. Now it is a place of brutality, the endless hunting ground of Keliots and their servant beasts. Urbeast. The Urbeast is a spirit of the deep forest whose aspect is often invoked by battle-crazed fighters of the Berserker gang. Within the Lakra priesthood, the Urbeast's intense fury is viewed as both a miracle and a deep wretchedness, a violence that both preserves and consumes the world. It is the fate of many who invoke the Urbeast to finally degrade into Gora, yelping hounds of mindless bloodlust, banished to the astral dark, howling, ever hungry above the lands of Achra. Night Crow. The Night Crows began as a sect of sorcerers who were cast out from the Gate of Death. Dressed in humiliating feathered garments, they wandered the bleak northern mountains until they came upon the corpse of a giant iridescent crow. The sorcerers ate of its magic, decaying flesh, forever gaining its power and shape. The Night Crows are now called the Wild Path for aspiring mystics who wish to pursue the glory of the stars. Anroth. Before the first distortions of the earth, Anroth was a fighter raised to divinity. It was Anroth alone who struggled upon the crumbling wheel of light, the descending rainbow of creation, for nameless years vanquishing demons of the fecund dark. Those who walk the path of Anroth abstain from glory-given powers, immensely raising their natural abilities and strengthening their weapons. Their emblem is a shield bearing the first rainbow that whirls in every direction. Ogham, a rebel sect that began among Lokra's skull-wearers. The mute Ogham follow a strict orthodoxy that forbids the utterance of divine language. To pray is instead to partake in the mystery of violence, the spilling of gore. The Ogham refuse the favor of their deities, for seeking redemption chaotically in the roar of battle. Mutter no prayer, for war is thy invocation. And finally, Struggler. Sometimes, from the contortions of history, a lone wanderer will emerge to challenge the nameless, shapeless beings that swarm the gulfs beyond the void. Driven by revenge or sheer tenacity, they are often hunted to brutal annihilation, erased from the memory of the earth. But for those washed in the utmost purity of violence, striding glorious through the howling wastelands of the path. That was Path of Achra,
that was the entirety of Path of Achra's lore. Well, the prestige class lore anyway. If you I think there's item lore. Yep. Yep. So if you want me to read the item lore, this video has to get 5 likes. You heard me, guys. 5 likes. So yeah. Well, you guys have a good one. I'll see my mold and fungi later. Goodbye.